Boston, 1872. On the edge of South Boston's slums, mothers whispered a single name in hushed terror: Jesse, a 12-year-old boy with one eye clouded milky white, as if something had already looked into him and claimed him before he ever killed. Children vanished from alleys. Some returned bruised, cut in half, mad with fear. Others did not return at all, and yet the police, the church, the school, none moved to stop him. It was as though the city itself needed this boy, this monster, for reasons too dark to name. This story is not about one child's crimes. It is about the hidden machinery of America's institutions, how they fed him, used him, and then buried him in silence. The year was 1872, and Boston was still reeling from the Great Fire that had consumed 65 acres of the city only months before. Entire neighborhoods lay in ashes, and fear clung to the air like soot. Amid the rubble, people whispered about the devil moving in children. The old Puritan sermons resurfaced: fear of original sin, of bloodlines cursed by God himself. In this smoke-stained city, Jesse Pomeroy emerged, not from wealth, not from power, but from a family already fractured by violence. His father, a Civil War veteran, ruled the household with the belt and the buckle, leaving scars across Jesse's thin arms. His mother, a seamstress, looked the other way. But those who met Jesse claimed the boy's cruelty wasn't learned, it was born. He smiled when others cried. One survivor whispered, like it gave him life. It began with a 7-year-old boy lured into the marshes near South Boston. When he was found, his clothes were torn, his skin carved with knife cuts in strange, almost deliberate patterns. He could barely speak, but when he did, he said the boy who hurt him recited Bible verses backwards. The authorities dismissed it as childish fantasy, but the marks were real. The child's flesh bore not just wounds, but symbols. Circles, crosses, and lines carved into his chest and arms, as though Jesse had been copying something from an older text. And when asked who did it, the boy answered in a whisper, "The one with the dead eye." Few remember now, but Boston's South End parish kept quiet records of its children. The register for 1871 notes Jesse's baptism, but not in the main font. His name was written separately in red ink, on a torn piece of paper tucked into the back of the book. Why, the priest at the time, Father Callahan, later confessed, though his confession was locked away for a century, that he saw Jesse as a child touched not by God, but by the other one. The church did nothing. They had seen it before in Salem, in the orphanages, in the prisons. Such children were not punished, they were studied. The institution needed him alive. Reports exist, buried in Harvard's archives, of doctors called secretly to examine Jesse after the first mutilations. The boy was strapped to a chair, his pulse taken, his drawings collected. What he drew shocked them: diagrams of houses with hidden rooms, basements with chains, tunnels beneath cemeteries. None of these places Jesse had ever seen. And yet, weeks later, when the city widened its roads, workmen unearthed precisely such a tunnel, bricked over beneath a churchyard. Inside were shackles and bones too small to belong to adults. The doctors did not publish their findings. Instead, they declared Jesse troubled by familial abuse. The truth, that he seemed to remember things he should never know, was silenced. His mother swore he was just a misunderstood boy, yet neighbors recalled her scrubbing blood from his clothes late at night. His father drank himself into stupors and warned others not to enter Jesse's room. He listens. He told a neighbor once, at night he listens to voices that are not his. And indeed, the boy's room was stripped of toys, stripped of comforts. Only one thing remained on the shelf: a small, leather-bound book, no title on its cover, its edges burned as though someone had tried, and failed, to destroy it. Later records describe the book in detail. It was not written in English. By 1873, Jesse had left scars on at least 7 children, yet no jury convicted him. Witnesses disappeared, parents were paid off, police reports were written. When asked why, one officer remarked, "The city don't want him gone, they want him kept." But kept for what? Boston was a city of institutions: the asylum, the almshouse, the seminary, the orphanage. Each of them needed the broken, the criminal, the monstrous. Jesse was the perfect specimen, the proof of their whispered theories, that evil could be bred, studied, catalogued. He was no longer a boy. He was an object of research. April 1874. A young girl named Katie Curran vanished after being last seen near Jesse's home. Her body was later found in his basement, her throat slashed, her corpse hidden beneath piles of ashes. But the newspapers said little. The murder was reported but not investigated deeply. Jesse was arrested, yes, but not executed. Instead, he was sent to the state reform school, a place that would keep him not as a prisoner but as a subject. Behind those barred windows, doctors took notes as he mutilated animals, carved into wood, and whispered in tongues no one had taught him. Years later, an anonymous guard confessed that Jesse was kept in a cell no other child was placed in. The walls had been reinforced with iron. Strange inscriptions were scratched into the plaster, not by Jesse, but long before he arrived. The reform school was not just a correctional facility, it was a laboratory. Children were rotated in and out of Jesse's proximity, as if to test whether cruelty was contagious. Records show a sharp increase in violence among inmates after Jesse's arrival. It spread like an infection. And still, the city looked away. Near the school stood a field, once used for burials of paupers and unwanted infants. During expansions, workers found rows of tiny graves with no markers, bones fractured, skulls sawed. The state ordered silence and the ground was paved over, but the old nurses whispered they planted something there, not just children, experiments. When Jesse was allowed to walk the yard, he always paused at that spot, his blind eye twitching, his lips moving in inaudible prayer. He knew something was beneath him, perhaps he always had. In 1874, only months after Katie's death, 4-year-old Horace Mullen disappeared. His body was found on the beach, his throat cut so savagely the head was nearly severed. Jesse confessed, calmly as though describing breakfast. "I had to," he told police. The voice said so. When pressed on the voice, Jesse grew silent. Then he smiled, the one from the book. The book was seized. It was never seen again. The city expected spectacle. A 12-year-old murderer, pale, hollow-eyed, standing trial for murder. But transcripts from the courtroom are curiously short. Witnesses' words were stricken. A medical testimony sealed. What remains are the judge's final words. This child is guilty, but he cannot be punished as men are punished. He must be kept, for his nature is instructive. And so Jesse was not executed. He was locked away for life, but even prison was not an end. It was a continuation. In Charlestown Prison, Jesse was placed in solitary confinement. The room was only 8 by 10 feet, a stone box with a slit of light. He would live there for more than 50 years. Guards reported strange occurrences, tapping sounds in the walls, foul odors that came and went, Jesse speaking in voices far deeper than his own. He began carving the walls, circles, crosses, and words in languages no one recognized. By 1900, the cell itself was called the Devil's Room. Guards refused to enter. Jesse wrote thousands of pages from his cell. Most were destroyed, but a handful survived, hidden in private collections. They describe visions, cities sinking beneath water, children born eyeless, entire towns silenced overnight. What chilled readers most was his accuracy. In 1918, Jesse wrote of a sickness that drowns the lungs. Months later, the Spanish flu struck Boston, killing thousands. Coincidence or prophecy? Strangely, Jesse received visitors, women, mostly mothers, who claimed they had lost children. They sat by his bars, listening to him speak. Some returned weekly. A few even petitioned for his release. But after their visits, many of their own children began showing violent behavior. Slashing animals, whispering at night, carving symbols into wood. It was as if Jesse's infection of cruelty spread not only through touch, but through words. A ledger from Charlestown Prison reveals entries marked with a strange symbol next to Jesse's name, a circle intersected by a vertical line. This mark was never used for other inmates. Its meaning remains unknown. But whenever the symbol appeared, another inmate died mysteriously. Suicide, sudden illness, unexplained collapse. Jesse himself was never touched, never harmed. He lived, pale and thin, decade after decade. It was as though something protected him. By the 1920s, Jesse was an old man, but still confined. He had grown gaunt, skeletal, his blind eye sinking into its socket. Yet he remained eerily lucid, speaking calmly of events yet to come. In 1929, he warned a guard of the market falling and men leaping from buildings. Weeks later, the stock market crashed. They called him insane, but they kept listening. His predictions were always written down, always filed away. In 1932, Jesse was found motionless in his cell, declared dead. His body was removed, records sealed, but no death certificate was ever filed with the state. Some claim he was buried in an unmarked grave. Others insist he was transferred quietly to a private asylum in upstate Massachusetts, where certain patients were never listed. The truth, no one knows. In 1972, on the centennial of Jesse's first crime, archivists at the Boston Public Library discovered a locked cabinet mislabeled fire insurance records. Inside were files on Jesse, photographs, letters, and sketches. One sketch showed a map of Boston with 7 marked sites. All were orphanages or schools. All had histories of missing children. The cabinet was quickly resealed. Officially, it never existed. Was Jesse Pomeroy simply America's youngest serial killer? Or was he something else? Something birthed by a city that thrived on secrets, a church that silenced confessions, a prison that studied men instead of saving them. Perhaps Jesse was not a monster born. Perhaps he was made by the very institutions that claim to protect us, and if that is true, then Jesse's story is not about the past at all. It is about what they are still doing now.